preserve a historic building, I think we are allowing residents and visitors in Houston to see what life was like in Houston.
A historical building is very valuable because you really can't go get another one. And so once you tear it down, it's gone.
Preservation is very important, and I think it's very important that we maintain our historic district status, and that is certainly endangered because we are tearing them down so fast.
The very bungalows that are historic are in jeopardy of being torn down for a developer's, 3-unit condo.
Historic preservation in Houston has traveled a rocky road over the years.
I think that one of the unique challenges that we have here in Houston is that we don't have zoning. So that really kind of changes the landscape that we have in terms of our regulation and how we can approach these things. We're very lucky though to have this historic preservation ordinance, which stands alone apart from having a zoning ordinance, so that we're at least able to have some control over what happens in our districts.
Houston didn't get its historic preservation ordinance until 1995. And to put that in perspective, Los Angeles, which is the city we're most often compared to, had its first preservation ordinance in 1962.
A pivotal event happened in 1954, leading to formation of the Heritage Society.
Things started when they were going to put in Allen Parkway and run it right through the Kellum Noble House, which at this time was just an abandoned, they had people were building fires in the floor in there. But since it was one of the oldest structures still around, it probably was the oldest, people wanted to save it, so the Heritage Society was started.
A few blocks away, the Market Square area wasn't faring as well.
The worst one was Warren's Inn, when everybody tried to save the old Opera House, and there'd be people that'd come down every time they'd start to tear it down, and they'd form up a line, they'd call people. So Guardian Savings that owned it gave them a lease. And everybody thought they'd won, and they went home to celebrate, and they tore it down while everybody was celebrating.
South Texas National Bank and two 1883 gems, the B.A. Shepherd and the Dumble buildings, came down in 1986.
Like Manette Basil was starting one of her first historical tours, and showed up that morning, and there it was, a pile of rubble, where the night before it was still a building. Those are my three favorite buildings. The bar owners, when Westheimer was opening up, they in the Richmond Strip, they all got up and within a year or two moved out there, and downtown fell into disarray. And the only things that came in down here for years were porno movies and bookstores.
Greater Houston Preservation Alliance was formed and encouraged people to restore these old buildings. Lee Benner and various partners took on the W.L. Foley building in the 200 block of Travis.
By the early 90s, I was wanting to do something downtown, maybe a coffee house or something, some place that people would go to and like to be at and have a conversation, and it was, because there wasn't anything down here.
The building had suffered a major fire and presented a daunting challenge.
But I couldn't get any banks to loan me any money on this, but I still had 1 year left on my Mazda truck, and the bank gave me $2,000 on my truck, and I put that down on the building. So the Buildings and Standards Commission gives me 30 days to get a permit and 90 days to shore it up, or I had to come back to them with a demolition permit. So off I went on my new adventure. I had $5 cash, and the first two engineers I called wouldn't walk in the building.
Benner did find an engineer and got the building shored up.
At the 11th hour, at closing time on the 30th day, I went in and got a permit. There wasn't a stick of wood, except up in the casement windows back into the brick, there was some wood that hadn't burned. And there was some parts of the old windows, and there was lots of pigeons living in here.
Benner recycled period material in restoring the Foley building.
All the wood in the back windows are from the oldest building that was torn down about that time in Lake Jackson. And so we used all the wood for the scaffolding, because it's big old heavy thick stuff. And then when we got through rebuilding the back wall, we took the wood and planed it down and made it into the windows.
He applied his artistic background to creating a special space for a bar and restaurant, including a unique staircase.
The biggest challenge on him was finding it. I had to re-engineer the whole thing, because it has to be metal stairs downtown, and we want it to look like wood stairs. So we had to then stop and re-engineer the whole thing. But at the time that we started building them, I started in my studio building the stairway here. And this is old parts out of a scrapyard, almost all of it, the wood I made. There's a bearing race and the lamp part.
The City of Houston began to take an active role in encouraging historic preservation.
Well, the city's historic preservation ordinance was adopted in 1995, and that gave the city the authority to designate historic districts and historic landmarks. Our first district was Cortlandt Place, and that was designated in 1996. And since then, we've added 15 more. We are up to 16 now. We also have the Old Sixth Ward Protected Historic District. We have a number of districts in the city that are listed in the National Register. Independence Heights and Freedman's Town are National Register districts that are not city districts right now. A number of our city districts are also listed in the National Register. They have both designations. The city historic districts that we have right now are all located inside the Loop and are all located on the west side of downtown. We have a cluster of them in the Greater Heights area. We have another group in the Montrose area, and then a third cluster in the Museum District.
Historic district status is usually not something that starts with the city.
There are two ways that a historic district designation can come about, and one is if the city initiates it. That would be the Houston Archaeological and Historical Commission can initiate a historic district designation, although that rarely happens. Most of our districts have come about because the homeowners in the neighborhood have petitioned to become a district. The requirement is that a majority of the property owners in the district sign the petition, and once they get enough signatures, they can turn it in. We'll do an inventory of all the structures in the neighborhood and we'll classify them. Contributing and potentially contributing buildings are historic buildings in the neighborhood. Non-contributing would be new construction or historic buildings that have been significantly altered to the point where they don't even appear historic anymore. Usually the first step is that we're contacted by someone in the neighborhood. It could be a civic club president or just a resident in the proposed district that's interested. And we'll work with them, we'll help them develop their materials and explain the ordinance. We'll help them reach out to the people in the community. We're always free to come speak at civic club meetings and other neighborhood events to discuss the benefits of designation and explain how the process works. Well, there are a number of benefits to historic designation. One of the main ones is the city offers tax exemptions for properties in historic districts. There are certain requirements that you have to meet, but if you are eligible for the tax exemption, you can get up to 100% exemption on your city taxes for up to 15 years.
The first of the city's historic districts was Cortlandt Place, but even that stately street had its doubters at first.
Not all the neighbors were in agreement. They were very afraid of what that might mean. That was a very new concept for Houston. They thought they might have tourists, they might have people picnicking on their lawns, and apparently it was a very, very contentious, emotional kind of thing.
Well, every district is different and has different circumstances. And like for example, our oldest district is Cortlandt Place, and we haven't seen any tear downs at all in that neighborhood. It's just a really stable neighborhood. Houston Heights is the area where we see the most redevelopment occurring and has the most redevelopment pressures, and it causes a lot of distress among property owners within the neighborhood, both those that want to preserve their neighborhood as it is and those that want to allow new construction.